Thalren stood at the observation deck window, his 4 eyes tracking the approaching vessel. The human ship moved with unusual grace through the void, its metal hull gleaming under the distant stars. He had seen many species arrive at Harmony's eye station over his 30 years as a xenologist, but humans always caught his attention. They were still relatively new to the galactic community. Barely 200 years since first contact, the ship docked with a soft clang that reverberated through the station's walls. Thalren adjusted his recording device, ready to document another peaceful negotiation. The Kryn Empire had been pushing into human territory for months, testing boundaries like aggressive children. The Galactic Collective hoped these talks would prevent bloodshed. Ambassador Deho emerged first from the airlock. He was a tall human with graying hair and calm eyes that seemed to measure everything. Behind him came Captain Minji, her uniform crisp and decorated with symbols Thalren had learned meant combat experience. The third human was Junho, a younger male carrying data tablets and scientific equipment. "Observer Thalren," Deho said, extending his hand in the human greeting. Thalren touched it carefully with his manipulator appendage. Humans enjoyed physical contact in ways most species found unusual. "Ambassador, welcome to Harmony's Eye. The Kryn delegation arrived yesterday." Minji's expression hardened slightly. "Are they causing trouble?" "They have been vocal about their territorial claims," Thalren admitted. The Kryn had spent the previous day loudly declaring that 3 human colony systems rightfully belonged to their empire. They had called humans soft mammals, who hid behind words instead of showing strength. Deho smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We'll see what we can do about that." The negotiations began that afternoon in the Grand Hall. The Kryn commander, a massive creature covered in armored plates, slammed his clawed appendage on the table. "These worlds are ours by right of power. Your species lacks the strength to hold them." Thalren watched Deho carefully. The human remained calm, hands folded on the table. "Commander, we don't measure rights by who can hit harder. We measure them by treaties, by agreements, by civilization." "Weakness," the Kryn spat. "Pragmatism," Deho corrected. "You want these systems? Let's discuss why. What resources do you need? What trade routes? Perhaps we can find a solution that doesn't require violence." For 6 days, the talks continued. Thalren observed with growing fascination. Humans were natural negotiators, finding middle ground where others saw only conflict. They offered trade agreements, resource sharing, even demilitarization of 2 contested colonies. Slowly, grudgingly, the Kryn began to listen. On the 7th day, a treaty was signed. The border would remain mostly as it was. Humans agreed to remove military installations from 3 outer colonies. In exchange, the Kryn would recognize human sovereignty and open trade channels. As the Kryn delegation departed, their commander paused by Thalren. "Tell your collective that we accepted because it serves us, not because we fear the humans." After they left, Thalren approached the human delegation. "Ambassador, I must say, your diplomatic skills are remarkable. The Kryn are notoriously difficult." Deho looked tired. "We prefer talking to fighting, observer. War is expensive in ways that go beyond money. Your species seems genuinely peaceful," Thalren observed. "I will be recommending humanity for the Harmony Council in my report." Junho, the science officer, glanced at Captain Minji. Something unspoken passed between them. "That's very kind," Deho said carefully. "We do value peace. It's why we build diplomatic corps before we build fleets. And yet," Thalren gestured toward the observation window, where the human warship Times, Indomitable Times, floated. "Your vessel carries enough weapons to destroy a small moon." "Insurance," Minji said quietly. "We hope we never need it." That evening, Thalren compiled his observations. Humans demonstrate remarkable restraint and preference for peaceful resolution. Their military capabilities appear primarily defensive. They seem uncomfortable with displays of force, preferring dialogue and compromise. Assessment: Low aggression rating. Recommended for advanced diplomatic status. He was preparing to transmit the report when he passed by the human delegation's quarters. The door was slightly open. He heard voices inside. Do you think they'll honor it? That was Junho's voice. The treaty? Maybe. Daeho sounded less diplomatic now, more tired. The Kryn respect strength, though. They see our willingness to negotiate as weakness. Should we have kept the installations active? Minji asked. No. We gave peace a real chance. We offered them everything reasonable. Daeho paused. Let's just hope they never give us a reason to show them what we really are. And if they do? Minji's voice was cold. Then they'll learn why Earth spent 10,000 years perfecting warfare before we reached the stars. They'll learn that our diplomacy isn't weakness, it's mercy. Thalren stepped back from the door, his translation device working overtime. He didn't fully understand the implications of what he'd heard. Humans had seemed so peaceful, so reasonable. Surely Daeho was simply posturing, the way tired negotiators sometimes did. He transmitted his report recommending humanity for the Harmony Council. 3 months later, he would remember this moment and realize how badly he had misunderstood everything about the species called human. He would learn that the scariest predators are not the ones who always show their teeth. They are the ones who smile until you give them no other choice. Thalren had been on New Haven Colony for 5 weeks when the sky started burning. The human settlement was nothing like he expected. After months of observing their warships and military protocols, he thought human colonies would be fortresses. Instead, New Haven was farms and schools and families. Children played in gardens while their parents tended crops that fed 3 neighboring systems. Observer, would you like more tea? Heijin asked, pouring the steaming liquid into his specially designed cup. She was a farmer, her hands rough from soil work, her smile genuine. Her daughter Sora sat beside her, drawing pictures of the local wildlife. You are very kind, Thalren said. He was compiling a cultural study of human civilian life, fascinated by how differently they acted away from their military. Your people seem very content here. Why wouldn't we be? Heijin laughed. Good land, good neighbors, peace with our borders. What more could we want? The military installations had been removed as promised. Only a small civilian defense force remained, barely enough to handle pirates. The Kryn had honored the treaty for 2 months. Everything seemed stable. Thalren was writing his evening notes when the first explosion shook the ground. His recording device activated automatically as he stumbled to the window. The sky was full of fire. Massive ships hung in orbit. Kryn, warships, dozens of them. Energy beams lanced down from space, turning buildings into plasma. This is Governor Chen to all residents. A human voice cracked over the emergency system. Orbital bombardment in progress. Reach the shelters immediately. This is not a drill. HSR Jam. HSR Jam Mater. HSR Jam Mater. HSR Jam Mater. HSR Jam Mater. HSR. Thalren ran outside. The streets were chaos. Humans sprinting toward underground bunkers, carrying children, helping elderly neighbors. Another beam struck 3 blocks away. The explosion threw him to the ground. Observer! Heijin grabbed his arm. Sora clutched against her chest. The shelter! Come on! They ran through smoke and screaming. A beam struck the school Thalren had visited yesterday. The building vaporized. 30 children had been inside. 30 children who would never go home. The shelter door was heavy metal, built into bedrock. Hundreds of humans packed inside, silent except for crying children. The walls shook with each impact. Thalren's device recorded everything, the terror in human eyes, the way parents held their children, the absolute helplessness. Why? Sora whispered, her small voice cutting through the noise. Mommy, why are they hurting us? Heijin had no answer. she just held her daughter tighter. The bombardment lasted 3 hours. When the shaking finally stopped, the shelter commander, a retired military officer named Kang Su, checked the exterior sensors. His face went pale. Surface temperature readings. Most of the colony is gone. 40,000 people were up there. Silence. Heavy, crushing silence. They're landing ground forces, Kang Su continued, his voice mechanical. Sensors show Kryn troops deploying across the remains. Thalren accessed the shelter's communication array, his diplomatic clearance giving him access to military channels. What he heard made his blood freeze. Kryn communications were being broadcast openly, no encryption. They wanted humans to hear. Hunt them. Make sport of it. Show these soft creatures what strength means. They were hunting survivors. For entertainment, Kang Su activated the human military distress beacon. This is New Haven Colony. We are under Kryn attack. Treaty violated. Orbital bombardment complete. Estimated 40,000 casualties. Request immediate assistance. The response came 6 hours later. Thalren had his device monitoring all frequencies. He heard the transmission that made every human in the shelter go absolutely still. New Haven. This is Captain Minji of the Times. Indomitable asterisk. We are inbound with the Third Fleet. Hold position. Protect survivors. A pause, and then her voice changed, became something that made Thalren's scales prickle. All safeties are now off. Authorization. War protocol. Omega. The shelter's communication specialist, a young man named Donghyun, started crying. Not from fear. From something else. What does that mean? Thalren asked. War protocol Omega? Kang Su was checking weapons lockers, his hands moving with practiced efficiency. It means the rules changed. It means they killed our children. On the Kryn command channel, Thalren heard something he didn't expect. Fear. The Kryn commander who had ordered the attack was screaming orders. Pull back to defensive positions. Get the fleet between us and incoming humans. Sir, they're just humans. We have numerical superiority. You don't understand. The commander's voice cracked. War Protocol Omega. They told us about this in intelligence briefings. I didn't believe. Pull back now. Thalren didn't understand. Humans were peaceful. He had written reports about their diplomatic nature, their preference for dialogue. They had given up military bases to avoid conflict. Heijin sat beside him, still holding Sora. Observer, you should know something. We gave up those bases because we wanted peace. We tried everything to avoid this. She looked at her daughter, then back at him. But we didn't survive 10,000 years of evolution by being prey. Above them, through kilometers of rock and soil, the human fleet was arriving, and Thalren was about to learn that humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their diplomacy or their technology. It was their mercy in choosing not to be what they truly were. The ground began shaking again, but this time, it wasn't bombardment. It was war. The human fleet didn't arrive slowly. They didn't follow standard military approach protocols. They didn't announce their presence or give warnings. One moment, space around New Haven was filled with Kryn warships celebrating their victory. The next moment, human vessels simply appeared, materialized from faster-than-light jumps directly into combat range. Thalren watched from the shelter's sensor displays, his 4 eyes struggling to process what he was seeing. This violated every rule of civilized warfare. You announced your presence. You gave chances for surrender. You followed protocols that had governed galactic conflicts for millennia. Humans did none of this. The Times. Indomitable Times appeared 500 meters from the Kryn flagship. At that range, shields were useless. At that range, it was knife-fighting distance in space. Captain Minji's voice came over every frequency. You killed 40,000 civilians. You hunted children. There will be no warning shots. The Times' Indomitable Times fired. The Kryn flagship split in half, atmosphere venting in frozen clouds, bodies spinning into vacuum. 20,000 Kryn died in that first strike. The human ship was already moving, already firing on the next target. This isn't war, Thalren whispered, watching the systematic destruction. This is execution. Kangsu, standing beside him, said nothing. His eyes were hard. Across the battlefield, human ships moved with terrifying efficiency. They didn't engage in the traditional dance of orbital combat, the careful positioning and shield management that characterized normal space battles. They closed to brutal ranges and fired until targets ceased existing. A Kryn cruiser tried to retreat. A human destroyer pursued it, matching every maneuver, driving it back toward the colony. Then, the human ship did something Thalren had never seen. It rammed the Kryn vessel, using its own hull as a weapon, the impact destroying both shields. The human ship immediately teleported boarding parties into the breached sections. "They're fighting in zero gravity?" Thalren asked. "Inside a tumbling, damaged ship? Human Marines train for that," Kangsu said quietly. They trained for everything. On the ground, drop pods were falling, not careful landings. They were meteor strikes, slamming into Kryn positions with such force that the impact alone killed enemy troops. Armored humans emerged from the craters. Weapons ready, Commander Taehyun led the first ground team. Thalren could hear the combat chatter. "Grid 7, 15 Kryn hunters with human prisoners. G1, your team." "Copy." Moving, Marine G1's team hit the Kryn position like a hammer. No negotiation. No prisoners. The Kryn had been hunting human survivors for sport. Now, they learned what it meant to be prey. Thalren watched the tactical display with growing horror. Humans were using Kryn tactics against them, but better. They used the rubble of the destroyed colony as cover. They moved in small teams with perfect coordination. When Kryn tried to fortify positions, humans simply collapsed buildings on them. A Kryn ground commander broadcast a surrender offer. Taehyun's response was ice cold. "You didn't accept surrender from our farmers. You bombed their schools. You hunted their children. Your surrender is refused. This violates the Galactic Convention on Warfare. You violated it when you murdered civilians. We're just following your example." The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, every Kryn ship was destroyed or disabled. Every Kryn soldier on the ground was dead or captured. Not one escaped. The human fleet hung in orbit, and Ambassador Daeho's ship arrived. He looked older than Thalren remembered, his face carved from stone. He broadcast to the entire sector. This was the Kryn Empire's mistake. They thought our diplomacy was weakness. They thought our peace was fear. They learned differently. He paused. "Let this be a lesson to the galaxy. We will trade with you. We will negotiate with you. We will be your friends and allies. But if you slaughter our children, we will show you what humanity really is." Thalren was evacuated to a collective medical ship 3 days later. Haejin and Sora were safe, pulled from the shelter by Taehyun's team. But Haejin had died during a Kryn raid on the shelter's entrance. Throwing herself in front of an energy blast meant for her daughter. Sora survived. Her mother didn't. Thalren found Captain Minji in the medical bay, her arm in a healing sleeve. "Captain, I need to understand. The protocols, the rules of engagement. You ignored everything." "Yes. Why?" Minji looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. "Observer, your collective has rules for war. You fight over territory or resources or honor. You follow protocols because war, to you, is a negotiation with weapons." She stood, moving to the window, where New Haven's burned surface was visible. "For humans, war isn't a negotiation. It's not a game. When you attack our children, when you hunt our families, war becomes something else entirely. What does it become? Survival. And humans have been surviving for 100,000 years. We're very, very good at it." A young officer approached. "Captain, Commander Taehyun reports all survivors have been evacuated. Fleet is ready to pursue Kryn forces back to their territory." Pursue? Thalren asked. The battle is over. Minji looked at him, and Thalren saw something in her eyes that made him truly afraid for the first time. Observer, the battle is over. The war has just begun. She turned to the officer. Tell Taehyun to show them why we're dreaded. Tell him it's not about winning anymore. Ma'am? Then, what is it about? Making sure, Minji said quietly, that no one ever forgets what happens when you murder human children. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Thalren behind with a medical ship full of survivors and a recording device full of images he knew would haunt the galaxy for generations. He had wanted to document peaceful humanity. Instead, he had seen them become something else. He had seen them become what they had always been, beneath the diplomacy and smiles. He had seen them become wolves. Thalren made a choice that surprised even himself. He requested permission to embed with the human fleet as they pushed into Kryn territory. The collective granted it, wanting documentation of this unprecedented military action. What he witnessed over the next 6 months changed everything he thought he knew about warfare. The human fleet didn't just counterattack. They invaded. 3 full battle groups, over 200 ships, supported by Admiral Seojun, from the carrier Times' relentless asterisk. Thalren met the admiral on the bridge, expecting the usual military posturing. Observer Thalren, Seojun greeted him with tired eyes. I understand you want to document our actions. Yes, Admiral, for the historical record. Good. The galaxy needs to understand this. We're not here for territory. We're not here for resources. Seojun pulled up a holographic display showing Kryn space. We're here to break them. Completely. So thoroughly that no species will ever think attacking human civilians is acceptable. That sounds like revenge. No, Seojun corrected. Revenge is emotional. This is educational. The first Kryn system they reached was a military hub. Thalren expected a standard siege. Instead, human ships broadcast on all frequencies before attacking. The broadcast was audio from New Haven. Children screaming. Parents crying. The sounds of orbital bombardment. Then they attacked. It was psychological warfare on a level Thalren had never seen. Every system they entered heard the sounds of what the Kryn had done. Every battle began with those screams. The Kryn military started making mistakes. Their commanders rattled. Their troops demoralized. You're traumatizing them, Thalren observed. Yes, Seojun said simply. They need to understand what they did. They need to hear those children every time they close their eyes. The way we do. Number. In the third system, Thalren met pilot Unji. She flew a fighter craft that should have been suicide missions, according to Kryn tactical analysis. She survived every single one. How do you do it? He asked her, after she returned from a mission that destroyed an enemy carrier. I fly like I have nothing to lose, Unji said, checking her craft for damage. Because 40,000 people already lost everything. She launched again 30 minutes later, flying directly into enemy point defense fire to deliver a missile that crippled a Kryn dreadnought. She ejected at the last second, was picked up by a rescue shuttle, and was back in a new fighter within 4 hours. The Kryn adapted their tactics. They always did. But humans adapted faster. Engineer Minho showed Thalren the weapons development lab aboard the Times' relentless asterisk. We've been studying Kryn biology, their technology, their tactics. Every engagement gives us data. We use that data to build better weapons. That seems cold. It's efficient, Minho corrected, showing him a new missile design. This is tuned specifically to Kryn shield frequencies, 98% penetration rate. We didn't have this 3 months ago. We do now. You're building weapons to kill them specifically? Yes, we learned how they work. Then, we built things that unmake them. Minho's expression was neutral, almost academic. They chose to be enemies. We're just very good at solving problems. The galaxy watched in horror. The Kryn Empire was one of the major military powers, aggressive but following established warfare protocols. Humans were treating this like extermination. In the 5th month, Thalren realized the truth. Humans weren't fighting to win territory or destroy an enemy. They were fighting to ensure this never happened again to any human colony. The Kryn High Command sent peace envoys after losing 12 major systems. The envoys arrived under diplomatic flags, requesting negotiations. Admiral Seojun had them executed. "You can't do that," Thalren shouted. "They came under diplomatic immunity. They didn't send peace envoys to New Haven," Seojun said, his voice flat. "They sent orbital bombardment. Why should we honor rules they violated? Because you're better than them. We are. That's why we're winning." Seojun turned to him. "Observer, you need to understand. We gave the Kryn every chance. We negotiated. We compromised. We removed military bases to show good faith. They responded by murdering children. There are consequences for that. Every 3. But the cost? The cost?" Seojun's voice rose for the first time. The cost was 40,000 civilians. The cost was a 5-year-old girl watching her mother die, protecting her. The cost was already paid. We're just collecting what's owed. Thalren transmitted his reports back to the collective. Other species began withdrawing from defensive pacts with the Kryn. No one wanted to be associated with them. Not when it meant facing human military fury. The Kryn tried everything. They fortified their remaining systems. They deployed their best commanders. They even tried attacking other human colonies, thinking it would split the human fleet. It did the opposite. 2 more battle groups arrived. Humans pulled ships from garrison duty, from training missions, from reserve fleets. They came from every corner of human space, all heading toward Kryn territory. "This isn't proportional response," Thalren argued with Captain Minji, who had joined the fleet after recovering from her injuries. "You're using overwhelming force." "Yes. We want every species in the galaxy to see this. We want them to understand." She looked at the tactical display showing human fleets converging on the Kryn homeworld. "We're peaceful. We prefer trade and diplomacy. But if you force us to war, we will wage it with every resource we have. We will be thorough. We will be relentless. And we will make sure you never forget it." "You're trying to make them afraid." "No," Minji corrected. "We're trying to make them understand. Fear fades. Understanding lasts." The human fleet reached Kryn Prime 6 months after New Haven burned, and Thalren realized the war wasn't ending. It was reaching its final lesson. The human fleet surrounded Kryn Prime like a steel noose, 300 warships in perfect formation, blocking every escape route, every trade lane, every possible relief corridor. Thalren watched from the observation deck of the Times, relentless asterisk, expecting the final battle, the orbital bombardment that would mirror New Haven. It never came. Instead, Admiral Seojun broadcast a message. Simple. Direct. Repeated every hour, on every frequency. Surrender your war council. Accept occupation. Rebuild. That was all. No threats. No demands for reparations. Just those 7 words. The galaxy expected fire and destruction. The Kryn had bombed New Haven into ash. Surely humans would respond in kind. Thalren had his recording device ready to document what he believed would be the largest massacre in modern galactic history. Days passed. The human fleet waited. The Kryn government broadcast defiant responses. They would never surrender. They would fight to the last warrior. Human demands were unacceptable. The human fleet waited. "Why aren't you attacking?" Thalren asked Admiral Seojun on the 10th day of the blockade. "Because we're not like them," Seojun said, watching the Kryn homeworld rotate slowly below. "We could glass that planet in an afternoon. We have the firepower. We have the justification. 40,000 dead civilians justifies anything. Then why don't you? Because then we'd be no better than them. And because the galaxy is watching, We want them to see the difference. Sojun pulled up. Economic data. Kryn Prime imports 80% of its food. Their manufacturing depends on resources from mining colonies we've occupied. Give it time. They'll understand. Thalren sought out Ambassador Deho, who had arrived with the diplomatic corps. Ambassador, surely you're not planning to starve an entire planet? We're not starving anyone, Deho corrected. We're allowing the Kryn government to make a choice. They can watch their people suffer, or they can accept responsibility for what they did. But innocent civilians, like the innocent civilians at New Haven? Deho's eyes were hard. We're not targeting civilians, observer. We're targeting the government that ordered their deaths. There's a difference. 3 weeks into the blockade, riots began on Kryn Prime. Food shortages. Medical supply problems. The military could enforce order, but that didn't feed hungry families or treat sick children. The Kryn government tried to break the blockade. Their remaining fleet, held back for homeworld defense, launched a desperate attack. Human forces didn't even need to fight. The Kryn ships surrendered after the first volley destroyed their flagship. They had no will left to fight. In the 4th week, a small transport left Kryn Prime under a white flag. This time, humans let it approach. The transport carried the entire War Council, 23 Kryn military leaders who had ordered the attack on New Haven. They surrendered themselves to human justice. Thalren watched them being transferred to human custody. They looked small somehow. Defeated. The admiral who had ordered New Haven bombed couldn't meet anyone's eyes. What will you do with them? Thalren asked Captain Minji. Trial. Fair trial with evidence and witnesses. Then punishment according to human law for war crimes. She watched the prisoners being led away. We could have just killed them, but we're not barbarians. We have laws. We follow them, even when we don't want to. The occupation began immediately. But it wasn't the brutal conquest Thalren expected. Military Governor Yungsu arrived with the occupational authority. He was a career soldier, hard but fair. Our goal, Jungsu announced in his first address to the Kryn population, is not to rule you. It's to ensure you never do this again. We will rebuild your infrastructure. ATM. We will help restore your economy. But you will learn our rules about civilians. You will learn why attacking non-combatants is unacceptable. Number 4. 62. Number 4. Number 4. Human engineers began repairing damage to Kryn infrastructure. Human medical teams treated Kryn civilians. Human food shipments arrived, ending the shortage. You're helping them? Thalren asked, confused. After everything? We're helping civilians who didn't start this war, Jungsu explained. The War Council made the decisions. The people are just trying to survive. We understand that difference. Thalren saw young Sora for the first time in months. Captain Minji had adopted her, the little human girl who had lost everything at New Haven. Sora wore a new dress, her hair in neat braids, but her eyes still carried shadows. Auntie Minji, Sora asked, sitting in the observation lounge. Why did they kill my mom? Minji knelt down, taking the girl's hands. Because they didn't understand what happens when you hurt humans. They thought we were weak because we wanted peace. Are we weak? No, sweetheart. We're strong enough to choose peace. That's harder than choosing war. Minji looked out at the occupied world below. But when someone forces war on us, we're strong enough to finish it. Will they hurt us again? No, Minji said with certainty. Thalren spent the next weeks documenting the occupation. It was harsh, but fair. Kryn were required to attend educational programs about the rules of warfare. Their military was being restructured under human oversight. Their government was being rebuilt with humans monitoring every decision. But humans also rebuilt hospitals. They reopened schools. They ensured food distribution. They treated Kryn civilians with more care than the Kryn government had. He was compiling his final report when the Galactic Council broadcast reached the fleet. The Council condemned human military actions as beyond acceptable warfare protocols. They demanded immediate withdrawal and trial for human commanders. Ambassador Deho's response was broadcast galaxy-wide. Thalren recorded every word. To the Galactic Council and all listening species. We didn't ask for war. We asked for peace. New Haven asked for peace. 40,000 people asked for peace with their lives and their children's lives. They received orbital bombardment. They received hunting parties, making sport of survivors. Deho paused, his voice steel. We received a lesson in what happens when you fail to protect your own. We will never fail again. You call our methods excessive? We call them necessary. You want us to follow your protocols? Enforce them on species who attack civilians, not on species who respond to those attacks. We will withdraw from Kryn space when we are satisfied they understand what they did, not before. If the Council wishes to challenge this, send your fleets. But understand we extended our hand in friendship once. We signed treaties. We removed military bases to show good faith. That hand was answered with dead children. We won't make that mistake again. Thalren completed his report 1 year after New Haven burned. The Kryn were rebuilding under human oversight. Not one species had challenged human authority. No one had attacked another human colony. His final conclusions read, humanity's greatest mercy is their restraint in peace. Their greatest terror is their efficiency in war. They are not warriors by nature. But when forced to war, they become something far worse, warriors by necessity. And necessity has made them perfect at it. They do not fight for glory or honor or territory. They fight to ensure it never happens again. This makes them more dangerous than any species the galaxy has known. Recommendation to the Galactic Collective. Never wake the sleeping wolves. Never force humanity to show what lies beneath their diplomacy. Because once awakened, they will not stop until the lesson is learned. They are not the monsters. But they are very, very good at stopping monsters. Thalren transmitted his report and looked out at Kryn Prime, where human and Kryn children now attended the same rebuilt schools, learning together about peace and the terrible cost of war. He finally understood what Ambassador Deho had meant months ago. War was expensive in ways that went beyond money, and humanity had just sent the galaxy an invoice no one would forget.